Welcome everybody. Good morning. We thought we'll start now, although there's more and more people joining us, but so that we keep to time and we have enough time for our participants and speakers to share their experiences from their own country. I'm Maria Economou. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor of digital cultural heritage and I work at the University of Glasgow. Half of my post is based at the Museum. So we are still in Scotland in lockdown, partially kind of exiting this. So it will be very interesting for a lot of us listening to our colleagues preparing for the reopening. We are going to co-moderate this with Andrew Simpson, the Vice President of UMAC from Macquarie University in Australia. Andrew at the moment has some connection problems, so you'll have to bear with me and some of the other Universeum board members who have joined. There's Sébastien Soubiran, Marlene Moulou, Esther Bellis, so you can say, and sorry if I'm missing others, because it's now quite a lot of people on my screen. What I will ask, we'll start with some housekeeping, and then we'll move on to the core of our questions and our discussion. So as we had sent the information around to everybody, we are recording this. We have asked permission from our speakers. If any of you are not very happy with this, just turn off the video camera from your settings, because it is very useful talking to our members. There's a lot of people who cannot join this session and they want to be able to see it recorded. And our previous one, when we put it on YouTube, it already has more than 200 views. So it's really popular and a useful resource at times like this. We ran on the 7th of May, the first online Universeum Voices discussion. A lot of you were able to join then as well for the first time. It was the theme of reconnecting online. So we talked generally about the challenges and the issues, the problems we had during COVID, and how different university museums and their staff and people working with collections across university museums were handling all this. So it was a very open discussion in terms of the topic, all kinds of challenges. We talked about new ways of engaging. We talked about the kind of urgent enforcement of the digital and what challenges that brought, but also the different kinds of opportunities. We talked about isolation and the maybe new role of museums, university museums in particular, with a close connection with research and academia, where we're hoping all and waiting to see the results from science to help and assist the great problems of the global pandemic at the moment. And with all of this, we were discussing afterwards, and with the feedback we received, we didn't delve and focus in particular on the reopening. It was also a few weeks, it was almost a month ago, while now a lot of things have moved on quite fast. So a lot of countries have exited lockdown, and there are several museums around Europe that are, even the ones that are still in lockdown, all of us, it's very high in our concerns. How can we reopen? How can we safely welcome visitors again? And how in all this, what are the key challenges? What are the issues? What are the ways that networks like Universeum and this partnering with each other and supporting each other, how we can help and learn from each other's experience as well? And maybe rethink a little bit in this reopening, what's the role of physical contact? What's the role of other ways of communicating with different groups? Are the audiences going to be to remain the same? Because the ways of engagement have definitely changed. So these are some of the questions. And just to remind the rest of you, it was really nice to take the first few minutes to say hello to so many people from around the world. But to help a little bit with the connection, and I'm crossing my fingers and touching wood here again. We're very grateful to the University of Glasgow once more for we are able to use the institutional account for Zoom. And last time it held 90 participants without any glitch. So I'm trying to not to jinx it. We hope it will be the same. We have 53 people so far. So just to help a little bit with the network connection, I'm working from home and I'm hoping, like most of you, it will be okay. It might be best if the participants start turning their screens off. Most of you have done it, and the way you've done, mute your microphones. We'll have the discussion afterwards, but just to remind you, we'll use mainly chat in the first instance. So if you haven't used Zoom, it's a different channel that you're using. If you scroll to the bottom of your screen, your mouse, all the buttons should appear. And next to the big green one that says share screen, on the left, you should see the chat one. So if you don't have the chat visible, by clicking that button, you'll see the chat. You can see, for example, Sebastian is suggesting we use the chat to ask questions, what I'm just saying now. So feel free to put comments and do this while we're talking. We'll ask the three speakers we have to briefly explain to us what's the situation in the country, share a little bit the experiences from their own institution, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the things they've been discussing and some of the ways they're thinking about moving forward. So Andrew hasn't managed to join still. He was in New South Wales and I'm not so sure how his connection was. It is late in the evening in Australia, but I think he's having some technical problems. So I was normally going to keep an eye a little bit on the chat and on the participants. I have now turned down the waiting room, so everybody joining should be able to just come in. And I was going to make sure that the comments and discussions in the chat were going to be integrated in the conversation. Well, Andrew was going to talk more with our speakers and start the discussion there. But I'll kick off so we're not delayed, because we are very honored with three amazing ladies. Andrew was also going to bring the gender balance a little bit. But it's also some esteemed and experienced colleagues today from different parts of Europe. So we have Isabel Garcia Fernandez from the Complutense University of Madrid in Spain, who's also a vice rector. And she has very interesting experiences and extensive, not only from the university museum sector, but it's very interesting to see also from the university administration side, what are the repercussions, how to safely welcome our audiences, students, staff, and others as well from our communities to our universities. We have Joanna Slaga, moving to Poland from the Jagiellonian University Museum and the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, who is a chief cataloger there and vice president of the Polish Association of University Museum. I see the president as well joining, so it's great to have the Polish representation. And because also Joanna has the background in law, it's interesting that she can bring also the legal protection of museum collections, which she has been working on, that kind of perspective in the conversation as well. She also works on managing collections. So that's another, it's not just the humans, it's also the objects and collections that are in our care and what are the repercussions with the reopening. And then we are moving to Lisbon, Portugal, so back to the Mediterranean, and Raquel Barata from the university there. Welcome. She's the head of education, so she coordinates programs and audiences. So all this discussion about how to engage and who to engage with is very much at the heart and core of what she's concerned with. She works at the National Museum of Natural History and Science at the University of Lisbon. So we also have a variety of collections and museums represented, as well as different museum roles in our panel, because Raquel is responsible for the public offer and the engagement with the different groups. She's worked, among other things, also on environmental education in the context of society, was part of her thesis. So a lot of the concerns also with sustainability and the environment that have been in our minds and have been brought forward with COVID is also going to underpin some of our conversations. So welcome to all three of you. Thank you very much for joining us at a time that I know is particularly busy. And I don't know if you also find it, we found this, and with my colleagues, it's this transition from working from home, and transitions are always quite challenging, and managing the change to manage it well, both at personal and professional levels. So thank you for taking the time today to come and join the conversation. We're very grateful. I thought we were going to discuss the 30 minutes before all of you joined who is going to start first, but we didn't decide in the end. So I don't think it really matters. There's all the universities you represent and all your experiences are equally valid and important, and there's the same level of urgency, I feel, even if some countries are slightly going to do it a few weeks after some others. It's not the key issue there. So just to remind everybody before I stop talking, because I think I talked for quite a lot and we want to make this a conversation. I wanted to remind everybody the kind of key issues and questions we were talking about. So we're about to be reopening, we're slowly returning to our routines, and we're going to start thinking about working with our collections again. So how can we really offer an optimal service despite the safety measures that all of us will have to implement, maybe slightly different ones, but all of them will be there? How do we figure out to offer activities while COVID is still there? There's a lot of discussions even in the countries where the numbers have been mercifully low, both cases and deaths. This vary a lot among all of you participating, I know, and it's even with low numbers, there's still always some numbers there. So this is all the impact of that. And there's definitely talk about second and maybe even third wave. There's a lot of talk in our mind about how this is going to be the new reality. Even when our students and the courses start again, we all have to proceed with great care. So what is the role and what is the way for the organizations in your country to do, in your institution, how you're doing this? What are the main difficulties you had to overcome? And how can you still organize interaction with visitors? What form will it take? This is more or less the framework. So I'll just pick from how you appear on my window screen.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank the board of Universeum for the invitation of this event. I can't hear you, Anna. So, I don't know. Well, especially Sebastian, who contacted me, and all the Universeum board. We are making this possible. That really is a nice initiative. I watched the video of the first session and I like it a lot. I was comfort really to hear the same worries and challenges. I go ahead. Sure. Yeah, but before I get into the subject, I wrote a short script so I stick to my time. I would like to say that I'm not the same person who went home on March 18 when the university shut down. I have gone through a lot of reflections since then. I must say that it has been very sad for me from the beginning of the crisis, since a dear and close colleague, the vice rector for quality, died on March 20th, and other colleagues have had a hard time, including the general manager and the rector himself. And it's admirably, they have been working hard from their homes, and the university has kept going fairly well. As you must think, the situation in Spain is one of the worst. We're getting out slowly. And really, our government have failed miserably to address the crisis, and this has its consequences. Fortunately, it seems that we're coming out, even though we have a great political and economic crisis right now and in the future, in the near future. And of course, we will affect the university and its museums, which are financed directly from my vice rectorate. And we'll see what happens next year, next budget. This time, I think, is the time to recognize the real heroes who made their job in a commendable way, especially the health personnel and those who have made our life possible to continue in the best condition. And at university, we work hard with the laboratories and with the cleaning staff that have done a really great job for the institution. And really, we deserve to pay our tribute for those universities. Maybe we can do it from Universeum, but of course, in our institution, we're gonna do some recognition to all these people who work so hard. In the other session, the participants talk extensively about the cancellation of the face-to-face classes, replacement of online classes, and the concerns with the exams. This is very important and it really affects the function of the university. However, the most important thing for me, I think, is the people. That is where we want to focus on the return and try to explain our reopening plans. Despite all we have suffered and all I say, we have to move forward and try to see the positive side of the crisis. There is always one. This lockdown, as you said, we gave us the time to get organized and finish many things we haven't done or we left unfinished, especially the updating the documents and the inventories and many things we have, as I say, unfinished. And one thing I had the time to do is coordination work that had to be done. We have been working online, of course, with all the tools we have to work online, and the management and communication. We've done a very good job, although it has been hard, long hours of work, and sometimes we have a lot of stress and a little crisis in our teams, I must say. But now we're just accustomed to the situation and we're working much better. What I have, since my point of view as director, is I see I have a holistic view. I mean, I'm in charge of culture, sports, and extension. I mean, I have also the University for the Elderly. So I try to combine these things, music, theater, sports, trying to get into the museums and try to do more things because we have a really few people working in our museum. Really what happened in our museums, I go really fast because I want to stick to my time. Practically nothing. I mean, we are closed. We also had a catastrophic event. We had a flood at the Museum of Pharmacy last week. One of the equipment broke down and flooded a small part of the museum. No major damage occurred, but have left us worried about things that we must do when we come back, when we return. And one of these is to evaluate all the conditions of all the museums and collections we have. We have 30 museums and collections. We have 14 museums and 16 collections, so it's a huge heritage there. Before the lockdown, we were preparing a preventive conservation course directed to museum directors and staff in conjunction with the Spanish Cultural Heritage Conservation Institute that was focused on collections and with a special emphasis in scientific one. We're gonna talk about this in a moment. What we have done a lot of things, a lot of creative actions for cultures that have to do with museums. Of course, we went digital on the International Day of Museums. That for staff meant a great step, a great stress, but we did a good job, I think, and it's in our web. We discover, or we work with 40 works of art we haven't researched before. We keep in that track, so we're gonna do more studies like that. We also were working on the transformation of the course of the preventive conservation to be online. So the theoretical part will be online and the practical part we have to do in situ when we come back. Also, we adapting the entrance. We have several entrance for the first time, and then we adapt the job to do it online. So it has been really tough and complicated, but I mean, I'm optimistic about the results. And the last thing I want to say is when and how we return. This is the question. In Spain, not all the regions are treated the same. The worst pandemic is in the most populated regions and cities like Madrid and Barcelona. In Madrid right now, we're in the phase 1. Some museums have already opened, but the big ones of El Prado, Modern Art Museums will open on Saturday with all the safety measures. We will return to work in 3 weeks when we reach the phase 2. I hope so. And right now we have an exhibition at the art center that we have to leave. We have to take it down, and we will do it when we return. Also, we were gonna concentrate in some technical work. As I say, we have to check and evaluate all the conditions, the conservation conditions of all the collections. In September, when the activity of the university returns, that will, of course, that's what we expect. We will open the museums, at least 4 of them, the biggest and the more visited, with all the safety measures. Currently, we're working on the protocols for return based on what we got from the Ministry of Culture. I have a good relation with them since I've been in the field for more than 25 years, so I know a lot of people in the Ministry of Culture and the museums, and also the protocol with disinfection and cleaning to implement in our collections and locations. Really, I finished with that. We try to do the best we can. I said earlier, people is our major concern. People have responded wonderfully, and I have to thank all my staff for the great work and the support for the university. And it's what we're doing now. We're working on the protocols, and we will open on September with all prepared. I guess this is all for now. Later, if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you for listening and for being there.
Thank you so much, Isabel, and sorry for the kind of technical glitch throwing you back there. This is really interesting to hear, and the wide range of things that you're trying to do, but also how the experience, the extensive experience that you have also can help with this, together with the teams that are working on this. Joanna, my apologies, I cut you through. Everybody was hearing you apart from me, but I thought everybody had the same problem. So if you don't mind, I'll get back to you for you to tell us your perspective.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, in Poland, situation looked a little bit different, and our government implemented a lot of restrictions really quickly, because in the middle of March, so we stopped to function in normal way in schools and at universities and in different sectors. So it helped us maybe it helped us to avoid dramatic rise of causalities, but situation is on the other hand quite difficult for us, because these restrictions and long-term isolation prolong the spread of the virus. So now we reopen a lot of sectors, but at the same moment we see new data and numbers of infections. So they are quite on high level in case of Poland, but we still trying to reopen. So that's not easy situation for us when we need to do something in our institutions, and we have this dissonance when we see different information. So sometimes we feel that we need to think about all steps little bit. We are a little bit alone from point of our institutions. University were closed till the beginning of June. So of course, home office was most popular way of work. Students, of course, they have still only online courses, and in case of this kind of institutions like museums, they were closed also really quickly, and now there is time to reopen them. In case of our university, Jagiellonian University, it's the biggest university in Poland, and at the same moment, it's the bigger employer in our region. So I think in the time of pandemic, we tried and tested various schemes of functioning. So we tried from the beginning to use different solutions, and of course the main thing was to protect students, employees, and in case of museums, of course, our visitors. At the same moment, Jagiellonian University Museum is the biggest academic museum in Poland. We have 60 employees and big building, and usually really big groups of guests. So we needed to close everything, and we needed to function via internet. So it wasn't so easy at the beginning, maybe, because it shows us how much we need to do with digitizing. So we need much more. We have much more work to do to have much things to. We need to have much more material to work from home, for example. Of course, at the same moment, people worked from home. In case of my museum, it was over 70% of employees, but inside of the museum was group that this group needed to protect building and objects. We needed to realize a lot of programs we started before. So from my point of view, 3 months almost, I'm usually here in museum, and so I see this this time from two different perspectives. From home office, but only partly, and also inside of museum when we needed to function almost normally. So each day we needed to do almost everything like usually. This week we opened our exhibitions, one exhibition, and we opened our courtyard. And of course, it wasn't so easy to say when we will do this, when we see all data about virus in Poland and generally in the world. So we didn't rush, of course. And the first step and most important thing was to organize a safe way of work for our employees. So after 2 months, they started to work inside of the museum, but still we keep the shift work because our building is quite specific, and we have small rooms, small corridors, so we need to avoid congestions inside. So that's why we decided to bring them back, but a little bit in other way than usually. With the exhibitions, of course, this situation required sensibility, proper preparations, multiply of consultations. So we opened, like I said, only courtyard and only one exhibition. It's not possible as usually to visit in groups with guides. Guides only protect exhibition, and of course they are secured with protective items. We limited really hard guests in museum, and we are trying to find what to do next in next weeks. Today is the third day after reopening, and we had only 6 guests inside of the museum. So we see that people are not coming back so quickly, but it's not so easy, I think, after so long time inside in home when people were locked down, to start to function normally. Few people say that we back to normally, but it's not the same. It's not the same world. It's not the same situation. So we need to think about it a little bit different because situation is really different, and we need to look for balance. And of course there is problematic situation, mostly economic situation is problematic, and not only it's possible to see inside of our university. We see that generally in Poland and in university sector, of course it's not possible to work to collect money, but the most important thing is protection. And that's why I think that certainly in spite of some pressure, we shouldn't reopen units too fast. After 2 or 3 months of lockdown, 1 day, 1 week, it's not changed not much. I think that, of course, this reopening should be something more than only open of doors, and we should more, I think, from my perspective, this reopening is kind of reflection, and for me it means reorganization. We should think a little bit different in other way, and we need to find another way of functioning, because what's important at this moment, this situation can change rapidly, so we don't know exactly what will happen in next weeks, and so we need to think about new ways of work. And for me, for example, this time of lockdown, it wasn't bad time only. So we had time to realize different programs, to think more creatively. So to realize new programs, new projects. It was quite interesting how people work together only from home and via internet. So I think it was also time for new activities. So we need to think also in that way. Like I said, after this weeks and after reopening now, for me now still it's necessary to change the scheme of work. It's necessary to think about next steps, and to be really calm, and only that way it can be really good. So without any rush, and I think it's time for really big reflection.
Thank you so much, Joanna, because I think a lot of what you said is at the core of what you're thinking now about the need for balance, to keep alert, keep being informed, gradually reopen what the effect is, but also the importance of universities as employers at this time, where we're gradually moving more to the financial concerns, when the medical and health ones are going to go hopefully down, but then how to rebuild becomes also the next big concern. So thank you for that. Raquel, do you want to join in and sort of share the situation from Lisbon and Portugal? And you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Oh,
You also had some slides, I think, so let us know when you want to share the screen. It should let you do it.
Yes, and please inform me if you have any difficulties, because sometimes my internet is not very stable. I think everybody's using it at the same time because children are still in school at home, so maybe it happens. So thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. This is a very nice opportunity to discuss this very, very relevant matter nowadays. And I work at the National Museum of Natural History and Science in the University of Lisbon. Portugal had, fortunately, low numbers compared to other countries, and we are in the third phase of deconfinement. So Botanic Gardens, they opened in beginning of May, and our museum opened in the 18th of May. And now the country is in the phase 3, but Lisbon is in phase 2, because in Lisbon numbers are still not controlled. So I resumed our measures for reopening the museum in the 18th of May in the slides. I will now share the screen for you to see better what I'm talking about. This, I hope this is working.
Yes, we can see it fine.
Let me just open this. Yeah, okay. So just starting by presenting our museum. We are in the heart of Lisbon. This building is from the 17th century, but in the 20th century it inaugurated the National Museum of Natural History, and the Science Museum also with scientific instruments joined. And since 2011 we are the National Museum of Natural History and Science. We have several collections. It's a very big building with lots of different collections in scientific instruments, but also in astronomy, mathematics, zoology, paleontology, anthropology, and also botany, because we have the Botanic Garden. So you can see here a Google map from Lisbon to see the building itself and then the Botanic Garden. And just to show you that the first measure that we assumed for COVID and for the reopening was to close the main entrance of the museum and use the entrance for the Botanic Garden as the only one to access the Botanic Garden and the museum. So we have only one entrance possible for everybody, because at that point, the red dot you see there, at that point we can assume all the measures that I'm going to list next. So the general safety measures that we assumed was according with the national norms and ICOM. And I think they are more or less the same everywhere. And of course, we have to have the posters to advise for frequent hand washing and social distance. But we also measure the body temperature at the entrance. It is mandatory the use of mask inside the museum and inside the ticket office, not inside the Botanic Gardens. And we have specific containers for people to put the used gloves and masks inside when they leave the public areas. We have hand sanitizers available everywhere, where for the people to use it before and after leaving public areas. And of course, we reinforced cleaning and disinfection in all areas. The main thing here was that we implemented 2 separated one-way circuits that we didn't have before. So now the public use one-way circuit. They cannot cross inside the museum, and the staff, they use another one, a different one-way circuit. So the safety measures for staff, they include the rotating teleworkers. So we're now having people working 1 week and another week working at home. Of course, this is not possible for everybody, because we have also the front office people that are working in the ticket offices. And for that, we used a rotative scale for people to be inside the ticket office the less time possible, and to also have another to keep an eye on exhibitions or even the garden. So they are also rotating in schedules, not to be all the time inside the ticket office, for instance. We have, of course, less people in working in all the cabinets, and we give 2 masks per day if people need to each employee. We also distributed visors for the front office staff, and we made gloves available for everybody, and we reinforced again the disinfection of all the areas used for staff, because we also divided some we didn't have before in some places, but we kept the toilets only for staff now, and of course they are all disinfected also. The private use of instruments, of objects like the microwave, of course they have to be used one at a time and disinfected after each use. This is the measures for staff. For visitors and public areas, we had to have this huge calculation of how many people could we let in, and that is also important to have only one entrance for us to be able to control this number. And we assumed the norm of 1 person for 5 square meters, and now we can only allow 138 people inside the museum at the same time. We measured the body temperature, and only visitors under 38 are admitted inside the garden and the museum, and groups up to 5 people only. It is mandatory the use of masks, as I told you before. They have to do the one-way circuit, and we closed all the hands-on exhibitions that we had, mainly the physics exhibition and the mathematics exhibition. They had to be closed because we didn't have the ways of disinfecting all the objects that people could touch. So what we do now as a special offer is that we schedule special hours where the education office offers for people the demonstration activities inside those closed hands-on exhibitions. We also created new activities for smaller groups, up to 5 people. So we offer the guided visit for the new circuit, for instance, for the new circuit inside the museum. And I can tell you that we opened in the 18, and we have very few people visiting the museum also, but already had people booking for this visits. So I already made visits to 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, but yeah, they are very few, but people are wanting, they want to come back to the museum. And of course we are now talking about Portuguese people because we have the frontiers, the planes are not working yet, but it is an indication of the will that people have to come back. We suspended all the use of leaflets and maps, so we use QR codes for everything and ask people to download the QR code reader. And of course, if people that don't have that application or the gadget for that, then we have the leaflet. But we ask people to really not use paper. We remove all the seats that could not be safely cleaned and everything that could not be safely cleaned inside the one-way circuit. And of course, we made available hand sanitizers in all the public areas and reinforced cleaning and disinfection in these public areas. Only to add that in the International Day of Museums, we did a mixture of digital offer and physical offer. And it worked really well, because we could have this new opportunity. And I think this very, very sad situation brought us this new opportunity of thinking how to engage people also digitally that can participate online, and because they are away from Lisbon and cannot participate in locally. But this can be also an opportunity to engage new audiences in another, and old audiences in another way. And we also did a digital, that was an online program alone about the Africa Day, because we celebrated that with our partners to turn to make access to different objects in our collections more broad. And it worked really, really well. This online program that we did also during the International Museum Day week. So just to end, we also thought about some safety measures for collections access, because it's another thing that that happens in museums and we have to consider. So of course the measures are the same, I told before, but in this case we ask people, of course, to give preference to digital access, but from 15 June on it will be possible to be there personally consulting collections. And for this we ask people to make a request by email at least 15 days in advance, and include a list of all the objects or copies that will be consulted. Consultation rooms are, of course, properly disinfected and with quotation of visitors, and again the use of masks, gloves, and in this case also a gown is mandatory for the consultation room. And whenever possible, visitors should bring their own study material for consultation, or in case of the need of use optical equipment, we can provide, for instance, protective glasses. But all these are being disseminated for people to know previously how to prepare themselves to come and consult collections. Of course, all equipment will be properly disinfected before and after use, in this case by the curator or the conservator, and all the objects will be placed in quarantine for a period of 10 days, and people should also know this, because objects will have to wait for 10 days to be again consulted. So this is, I don't have any more slides. I will interrupt the sharing. This was only to resume what we thought of doing to reopen our museum. And I will leave all the comments and reflections about new audiences and new audiences engagement for questions and for the discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raquel. And we have Andrew joining us as well. So I will pass on to him to say hello and maybe comment on some of the things you said just now.
Hi there, Maria, and hi there, everyone. And thank you very much for the opportunity to join in this important discussion. It's very interesting to hear Rachel and the other speakers tonight talking about this process of reopening. Just from an Australian perspective, Australia is starting to reopen both its university museums and its non-university museums, but we're perhaps been a very fortunate country in as much as we have not had very many COVID fatalities or even very many COVID cases in comparison with a lot of other nations. And what I'm really been quite amazed by to hear from the speakers so far is the amount of thought and planning and careful sort of consideration of issues that people have been putting into thinking about the whole process of opening their museums up again. In Australia, we had a very difficult situation with our schools where nobody actually consulted the school teachers. The government just said, you're opening the schools again next week, everybody go back to work. And the school teachers were outraged that they weren't involved in discussions about how we can safely resume our practice in a post-COVID world. I guess I'd be interested to hear how much have you people been involved in actually designing the measures that should be in place for reopening? How much of a say have you actually had in the actual process of reopening your museums? Anyone is welcome to comment.
I can comment. I'm there. I'm a vice rector, so we have meetings every day. Tomorrow we're gonna have a meeting with the dean, because now it's we have a lot of problem with the returning of researchers. Right now we are in alarm state, so we can go to the university just it's in a punctually, like we have now the big exam for the access to university. We have to prepare. That is been a real problem. It's going to be at the university. Thousands of people at my university. It's our main concern right now. And now we are preparing all the protocols for all the buildings, in also all the facilities, including the museum, that have to be reviewed by the prevention service, and they have to be discussed and approved by the committee, our university, and then we can implement them. Real restrictive. I mean, they see all kinds of problems because we have many people that are old, that above 60, we have a problem or have a health problem, so they have to go through a health exam. So it's been a problem also because our own staff is quite old. I mean, they're over 60. So, but they want to go back, so it's fine. I mean, they don't have any health problem. It's only the age that is not a real problem. So they have to state that they are fine and they can go back. We are returning in 3 weeks. I mean, we can. Actually, many people will return. Many other people will stay at home working online. But what we are doing right now is with all kinds of meetings and doing writing those protocols to safely come back for the students, staff, and the visitors.
That's interesting. Has that been your experience too, Rachel?
Yes, I may add that, like Isabel said, all the measures that I listed were discussed in several meetings, and also with the Health and Prevention Department of the University of Lisbon. So they had to give us all the orientations for us to design all this. It was quite hard to have everything prepared. And in Portugal, schools are still closed, and they will open only in September. So about the activities, we could only think about making activities for small groups now. And even if we have, like we have this week, a group of 20 people from activities from a field of activities wanted to come to the museum, we divide them. We ask them to come in different groups of 5 people at each time. So yes, it has to be controlled right now, and we have to be able to disinfect everything that people may touch or close, like we did, or have to close some exhibitions because they are hands-on. And it is not possible right now to use them.
If I may chip in here, Raquel, as well, there's a comment from Alison Hadfield from St. Andrews asking about this comparison between schools and museums, both needing to have the hands-on learning, which reminded me the issues we were discussing at the Hantir. And hands-on is not necessarily the best to focus on. It's more the multisensory engagement that, of course, is also challenged anyway. And sometimes touching is not the safest or the best way to engage with an object. But although this will be, I think, examined in greater depth in some of the future discussions that our student engagement, as well as the digital initiatives working groups are preparing later in June, I thought it was interesting listening to all three of you. And I was wondering if you or the other people in the chat, all our participants, if you had any reflections already from these experiences. You all said about how in different ways you had to move into the digital. How are you finding some of the ways that physical and digital multisensory ways of engaging with objects and collections and exhibitions might work best? Any lessons learned, or maybe the opposite as well, things to avoid that you wanted to share with us?
What I wanted to say, yes, one thing, because I wanted to say in the presentation, in the first session, Maria say that all these initiatives that they were digital, they weren't, I mean, there's a whole range. There are good ones and regular ones and bad ones. As the same as we do with exhibition or museums, we have to do a deep reflection on that, because we are doing these nice digital activities, but maybe, I mean, it are challenge for us because we've never done before sometimes, but I'm wondering if they're really, I mean, we are fulfilling the objectives or are really useful at all. So we are reflecting on that too, on all the digital activities we're doing. We are doing a reflection is fine, or we have to do it in another manner. We really, I mean, considering the public we're addressing is they're useful for them. So we try to do that now, because we have done a lot of things. A really very creative time. I mean, everybody has ideas and really good ideas, but not all the ideas work.
Perhaps, yeah, it's interesting that it is a creative time, and whenever people's working situations are stressed by new parameters, it forces people into being creative. But the whole general question about how comfortable university museums are in the digital sphere is a very interesting one. And I'm wondering, have you in recent times worked more closely with say your teaching design staff to try and find new types of digital experiences during the lockdown? Has that been a focus of your work in the last couple of months?
Maybe I can say something, but also to add, I wanted to add something to the previous, because when we talk about organization of this reopening, of course, in case of our, for example, museum or museums inside of the university, we have this general principles of work organization from university, then of course sanitary rules, and then after we need to think about everything inside of our institution, because we know really much better the building, staff and everything. So of course we can decide what should we open, how we should work, but we need to combine different rules and different aspects. When we talk about this new activities, of course, like we said earlier, it was really active time, but at the same moment, it shows us sometimes we see that sometimes we are not good prepared for this kind of activities. So quickly, rapidly, everything is rapidly changed, and of course we wanted to say to everyone, we are still inside, we are still walking, we are doing something for for you with our objects, but not everything was correct. So now this reflection is important. And of course, from my perspective, we need to think about new programs and process. We need to digitize objects and collect much more data. But we also need to find different ways to use them. Because when we want to use this data, we should know what we want to say to our audience. Who is our audience, of course, and what kind of what kind of what kind of information we want to give to our audience. So sometimes I think this time was one hand quite difficult because we need to face really some new reality, but at the same moment we could think creative, and now we need to choose some way of thinking, of functioning. And we also need to think about different programs that we started earlier in different way, because somebody said here that each sanitary rule is better than and normal contact with audience with objects is better than everything in internet. Of course, this contact is much more better. But if we need to live inside of internet, because situation will change, then we need to have now the plan how to do this, and that we are really different institutions. Inside of our university, we have a lot of museums and collections, and we working in different ways. But we need to protect our collections, our work. Now we have really economic problems. We see them now, and we know that something bad can happen next month or next year. So I don't know. I don't have answer how to do this. Which way should we go? But I think it's most important thing now how to use earlier programs, and I think that this is time for different ways of thinking and different shames for the future.
I may add that for us during quarantine, it was we had a very large reflection about how to turn our offer digital and online, because it was a limitation for us completely. And we were very creative in thinking about new ways of offering contents and activities for the audiences using the online channels. But it also showed us our limitations now. And I usually like to see them as an opportunity to find new ways, like Joanna says, find out new ways of working together. And for instance, now we are working together with the department of the university itself to bring some discussions and to make live streams and to use their support and to work together, and that's working, and it's very good, and we have to find these new opportunities to work with some people and some departments that we didn't thought of working together before, or we worked less together. And I think now we can start creating this new way of working as a team, a real team, and also reinvent the digital offer. And like Joanna says, it's very curious to think that we need to find out what people want to see digitally, because it's different. We already know in audience studies what people want to with their visit in the museum. We know more or less what they want when they visit the museum. But now we need to find out what people want in a digital offer, because it's different, and we don't know it as a thing. So I think it's a new study, a new audience study that we have to start. It's to also study our digital audiences, and find out what they want, what are their questions, and how can we answer those questions like we already do in the physical visit in the museum. And it's a good question in the discussion, in the Zoom discussion, about how now to reinvent also the hands-on inside the museum. That's another dimension that we have to think of, how to reinvent this experience of touching an object, of touching a wall, of touching. And people, they want to touch. So I think now it's other dimension that we have to reflect, because on one hand we have to close those exhibitions, and of course we can demonstrate, but even choosing the experience to demonstrate, it can be difficult, because people may not feel, they should not feel frustrated not to be able to touch. So this is a very tricky thing, and lots of variables to think of in terms of public communication, and it's a challenge. There are 3 different challenges that we have now.
Can I say something? I saw in my presentation, this is the time we have the time to think. For us at the university, we have the time to coordinate, we have the time to connect, and that is more important than ever. I mean, we have the time to connect with other, like Andrews say, with other sections or other professors that work in the field, but they are in their departments or in the faculties. As I say, also, I knew there were many things connected in culture, music, theater, sports even, that we try to bring it into the museums, because I'm in charge for 1 year, and I saw that we have done a lot of things, but the academic community doesn't know what we do. Only the big exhibitions we do, they're really nice, but the small museums or the activities, we still don't get into our university. My priority is my university. I mean, is very big, but I know that everything is there. I mean, it's hidden, but we have 2 months to discover where they are, and now we're working more connected. They're helping us in many tasks that we're developing very well. Also, there are many people from the communication science faculty that work on digital. So we're working with them now, and we will work when we come back in September. So I think this is the positive thing of the crisis. And I say that in my university was really a tragedy. I mean, because we have human losses, but we see things positive. And we see things positive, and one of the things is we had the time to connect with our colleagues. I mean, not in our university, but now this session is a great initiative, because we need also to connect with other colleagues from other countries. We have the same situation, the same challenges, and the same worries.
Thank you. That's great to hear those perspectives. Also in the chat there, you might have just noticed that Louisa from Africa has told us about how, of course, the digital sphere is not an even playing field these days. I guess many of us in first world countries are sort of lucky to be in a situation where we can come up with a whole range of different digital alternatives as experiences to access to real collection objects. But in places where digital platforms aren't too stable, it's very difficult to even have the privilege of being able to think in that space in terms of developing new possibilities. The other thing that I'm reminded of in hearing all of you respond to that question about the digital opportunities or possibilities is the fact that it does give us time to consider what sorts of objects sort of naturally fit a kind of digital surrogate role as part of museums' outreach work. And certainly some sort of objects, to my mind anyway, that seem to fit that very well. And there are others that are very difficult to sort of transfer into a digital experience that's going to be of some kind of pedagogic value. So in other words, I don't think it's the same sort of thing if you're working in one kind of a specialised museum as if you're working in a different sort of a specialised museum. So it's not even an even playing field when you do have good access to digital material. But maybe is it possible to ask Louisa to tell us a little bit about the difficulties in Africa? Would that be useful? Can we unmute Louisa?
You can do it yourself, Louisa, because it doesn't.
Yes.
Aha,
hello, everyone.
Perfect.
Hi, Louisa.
Yes, good to see you all. And good to see that we're keeping safe and staying healthy. Okay. Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit, about what are the circumstances that you're confronted with now in your part of the world in comparison with what we've heard from our European speakers tonight?
Yes, like I wrote in my chart. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yep.
Okay. Like I wrote in my chart, the most challenging right now is that the museums are closed. We can't reach our audiences and our visitors, even virtually. That's the most challenging because most of the museums in Nigeria have 70% of students as visitors. And there's this online Zoom classes that have been going on with students. You know, the schools have been taking students on this digital platform because they are not in school. So if the museums in Nigeria had the opportunity, if we had digital platforms, if we had access to virtual exhibitions, you know, we would have been able to reach at least this group of people through virtual means, because most of the things in the museum is part of the curricula of the students. So that's the most difficult right now. We can't, our doors are closed. Just recently we started going back to work in, you know, in groups but even at that, we're not opening our galleries. We're just going to take care of our collection, you know. So, I mean, that's the most challenging right now for Nigeria, if you're asking.
Yeah, thank you, Louisa. That's very interesting. So it's almost as if it's a different set of problems that you're facing from what we've heard from our speakers. If you, in a way, have they suspended a lot of the classes and a lot of the teaching in Nigeria at the moment?
Yes, the classes, there are no physical classes. The students are all at home.
Yeah.
There's complete lockdown. But schools have devised a means of reaching out to their students, you know. They've devised a means of teaching them, and that's with Zoom and some other, you know, online teaching methods. That's what the schools are using right now to reach out to the students. Nobody, and just yesterday, there's been some easing in the lockdown, but schools are not part of that. Likewise, museums and parks, and you know, we're all still locked down for now.
Yep. Okay.
I think it's interesting to see from the chat a little bit also about the role of student involvement, and what Raquel was saying about we need to find out what the audience wants online reminded me a little bit of some conversations we were having with other university museums in the UK about the need to understand, before we look further afield in our communities beyond the university campus, I think sometimes we remain quite ignorant about the detailed profiles within the campus and our student population. I think the way they're becoming so increasingly diverse in terms of the socioeconomic profile, their stage of life, family work, when they're becoming students more and more so, and that might even change even more post-COVID. There is an opportunity that I think some of you alluded to in listening and working with our students more closely to help us navigate some of these things. They already, from what some of you were saying, are very creative and with their digital skills sometimes better than the museum professional ones. There is something there about a balanced involvement where it's a win-win situation, where they also get appropriate training back. But I think that's quite interesting for us to consider and see what works in this direction. It was interesting.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry, yep. Andrew, you go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, yes, it's a very interesting point you make, Maria. In some ways, university museums, because they're in this interesting kind of ecology of different sort of groups of people because of their institutional setting, in some ways they have the potential and the opportunity to be more creative than perhaps non-university museums. That was all just an observation.
Yeah, and also, like Maria said, having the opportunity to have the university students thinking about this and helping us to recognize what may be important for their audience, at least for their audience, to develop online. And they are very, very keen on that and very creative also. So yeah, an opportunity to work with university students.
I would like to add also, we have at our service interns that they were doing their internship, and then we had the lockdown. So because they are in a master's program and they need to finish their studies, we have to doing a really creative job in reassigning roles that they can do online. So they learn museology and a scientific, I don't know, it's the documentation or all or conservation. We have conservation and documentation interns right now. So we are doing a lot of time we're spending on designing these programs to do it online. I guess that next year, because we're not gonna go present, we're gonna go semi-presential classes next year. I mean, we're gonna have some online, so we're gonna return to classes. That's what the government is saying. So also with the interns that are working with us in the museums, we have to design these tasks they have to develop in order to fulfill with the requirements of the programs.
May I check also, turning a little bit more directly to our audience who's been very active in the chat. We only have a few minutes left, and I'm conscious we moved into the digital, which is inevitable and a very important aspect. But also the challenges of reopening. I was impressed, as Andrew was saying as well, about the meticulous thought that has gone from our speakers in their institution, how to open safely the physical spaces. And I wanted to check from the participants if anybody wanted to share some of the ways that they're finding now in this process that in planning for opening safely the physical spaces, any lessons learned or anything that has been particularly challenging that they might want to share. We are 60 at the moment, so although you can answer in the chat, I think you can also try to talk with unmuting your microphone. I think we'll be okay. The network seems stable. Was there anyone with the physical reopening that wanted to share their experience? what seems to be closer to your heart, I'm noticing from the chat comments, is about the student involvement. That's also part of this process. So if you wanted to say about any ways you found, okay, there is a concern there about sanitizing and how you can do this safely while not damaging collections. And I noticed Helen Rosten, who now got, and congratulations, Helen, by the way. It's sorry for us to miss you from Scotland, but great to see that York has got you. But she was asking because she's dealing with the cathedral. It's historic stonework. So there are quite a lot of specific as well as general challenges in how we do this well. I don't know, Helen, do you want to say anything about now that you're exploring this? Just after you started the job, I bet it's quite a lot thrown at you and how to do it best.
Yes, I managed 2 days on site before I had to close the heritage services down. So it's been a challenge, but we're working remotely and staying in touch. I think for us, we're very conscious that, as was said by someone else, the building is an object for us. And although we try to discourage people from touching the stonework, they will touch the stonework. So I think it's both caring for the collections and caring for visitors and finding a successful way to do that.
Yes, I don't think we can answer all the questions about the damage to instruments or furniture, but maybe point out here that keeping these professional networks, the way other people were suggesting articles and resources, is one of the ways to stay informed about the specific and the specific needs of the different collections.
Yep, there's been some great suggestions on the chat about different things that can be used with objects. I think there was a wonderful suggestion from Padova that suggested a particularly good disinfecting agent for paleontology collections. And I can really agree with that, because paleontology collections or rock collections, rocks and fossils and minerals, are things that everyone should be able to touch as a way of experiencing the specimens themselves. Anyway, that disinfectant that was suggested, I presume, was one that you actually use on the specimens and that you don't take it internally yourself, as some political leaders might suggest is a better thing to do. Who knows?
I think I'll refrain from commenting about that.
Probably a good idea. I should have refrained too.
We're nearing the end, but it's interesting to see also your suggestions about the students, that the same way as the digital infrastructure is going to be varying across our different institutions and countries. In some cases, the internships have been cut down completely, as you're writing. But also other people I know are discussing the possibility of online internships for students. We also had the question from Monica Callahan from Saxa here in Scotland, the postgraduate level, at the PhD level, where they're also giving some money as well as encouraging this bringing together of cultural institutions and PhD students. And I know that this has worked very well here. And from Greece, from Athens, I think we had from the Kapodistrian University, the National University, some suggestions about how it works really well. From Platon, I think, the suggestion of how you can improve and train student skills, but also gain back from their usually great creativity and other ways that they engage with a fresh eye, looking at our collections maybe differently. We have only 1 minute left, so I think you have just enough time. I hope you had the chance to type something in the chat if you wanted. You have just enough time maybe to have a last input, but yeah. I wanted...
May I add something?
Sure.
Because in the meantime, when we discuss about these different ways of thinking and of working, we need to remember one thing. This time, this COVID period gave us one important thing: all emotions. This is this psychological side, and this emotional load is really important for us now, because during this period we connected much more often with each other. I think we tried to know each other better inside of institution, outside of institution. and these connections between us, between university and the city, for example, in case of our institutions, is really important now, how to function together, because we realize different things now together. We fight with this virus together. People in Krakow gave much money for our hospital, university hospital. Our institutes try to find some solution for COVID. We know that we are one community, and I think it's also important to care about emotional side of our work now, and in all process we need to think about it, and we need to catch this strength from us, and it's important to use it for the future, because we will have a lot of problems and a lot of difficulties. We need to choose something sometimes, and it's not sometimes it's really difficult, but this emotional aspect, I think it's really important for us. From my perspective, it was one of best time when I can see our group now and other networks, how often we are with each other, and we can help each other really much. So I think it's important to say it. So
that was a great.
I wanted to add it.
That was a great point, Joanna, and I think a very nice way to finish and to close, that we shouldn't forget some of the good things that the hard situation has brought. And maybe as we go back gradually to previous ways of working, which will never be the same, but still, as we go back to our office and reopen the museums, to keep some of the good things about the networking and the sharing and the consultation and kind of supporting each other as well. So thank you very much, not only to you, but also the other two great speakers for joining us today, to Andrew as well for joining quite late in Australia. And
thank you, Maria. Yes, it's past my bedtime.
But also very importantly to every single one of you, we had some really nice perspectives and very broad, from Singapore to Nigeria, beyond Europe, because that's also the only way to move forward. So a big thanks from all of us, and keep tuned, not just with the Universeum, you all have different networks as well. We will be doing some more things towards the end of June, both with the Digital Initiatives Working Group, as well as the student engagement, both issues that all of you touched upon today. In the meantime, I hope you stay safe, stay well, and keep up the great work that you're all doing. Bye-bye from us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All the best, everyone, and thank you very much for the meeting tonight.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye-bye.